Hello, and welcome to Power of 10, a show about design operating at many levels of Zoom, from thoughtful detail through to transformation in organizations, society, and the world. My name is Andy Polaine. I'm a design leadership coach, service designer, educator, and writer. My guest today is my friend Meltem Naz Kaso, a Barcelona-based UX career coach with a background in UX research. Her last full-time position was at Glovo, where she served as a UX research manager and staff UX researcher. She works with senior UX professionals to unlock their careers by boosting their leadership and communication skills. Mel, welcome to Power of 10.
Thank you. That was so impressive. I really want your accent one day.
Oh, you've got a good accent too. So all those other people will be listening and dreaming of our accents. So tell us a bit more about who you are and what's your journey, from there, wherever there was, to here, because you have been in Barcelona for a while, but you're not originally from there either, right?
That's right. That's right. So I called Barcelona home and I'm extremely excited about it because I run a fully remote business. I feel that it's important to be able to locate ourselves now. So I've been here about a decade. My two kids all were born and they're raised here. Before I was in the Netherlands, doing my grad school. And before that, I was in technically 12 other countries. So I've been everywhere, pretty much. I was born in Istanbul, Turkey, and before starting UX career coaching, I've done, as you just said in the intro, a lot of UX work, particularly in the field of research. And before that, I had different careers. I've done investigative journalism, I've done research in academic and NGO settings, in policy, and whatnot. So I had pretty much different things happening for me.
So what was your trigger to start coaching? How did that get started for you?
Right. I'm curious about your journey too, Andy, because we have some parallels in there. It happened very organically. It wasn't that I woke up one day and said, I'm going to become a coach, or I wasn't aware that this was going to be a thing for me when I was still studying. But it just happened so that when I went down the managerial track, I began to work through people as well as with people, as you know, and I realized that there was a special sort of satisfaction when you succeed through people. But then, when you work in an organization, you need to marry the needs of your direct reports with the needs of an organization. In ideal setups, it works, and sometimes there is big clashes. But then I realized with further reflection that the thing that I really liked about management or working with people, helping them reach their goals, that was the coaching part. When I got to ask them open questions, when I really understood their
Yeah.
pain points, when I really helped them get unstuck basically. So that was the part. Coaching part was something I did when I was still working full time. I also did coaching on the side for many years before fully transitioning to running my business. So it was sort of this whole thing where I was doing multiple things at once, and that includes also training and teaching at a university and whatnot. And eventually, about a year ago, actually, I said, okay, let me give it a try. Let me make this my full-time effort to do coaching.
Yeah, you just posted your anniversary, right? I think on
Yes,
LinkedIn.
exactly. Yeah. Thank you. No, it was one of the last days of March. So it's been just a little over a year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
How much is your, I mean, I'm guessing the answer is probably a lot, but I'm interested in how, in fact, your background as a UX researcher has influenced the way you coach.
Wow. I don't know if I can help modify the question somehow. I know you're the host, but I wanna say
Yeah, you can.
because there is no way to answer that without also saying how being a journalist influenced my UX research.
Yeah.
It's like,
Okay.
everything just going on and influencing each other. So with journalism, I learned in my research that storytelling did matter because you can run the most rigorous UX research project in the world. But if you're not telling the story the right way for the stakeholders to care about it, for users to understand the right way your questions and that sort of thing, it was just not going to work out. So my storytelling communication skills gathered through journalism helped me run and communicate research, I believe, in the best way. And speed also influence from journalism. One thing I had learned that, you needed to balance rigor with speed. I like to think of it as quality at velocity. You
Mm.
cannot um, come up with a best story, whether it's a research report or when you're publishing for a newspaper in 10 weeks, right? Like maybe it's going to be a lot better than what you'll deliver in a day, but we don't have that much time. It has to be new to be news, right? So I, apply that for my research as well. I don't like to call it quick and dirty because it has the rigor. It's just that it's not the most rigorous like academic research. So fast forward, all those things influenced my coaching too, because I like to be present for my coachees. I
Yeah.
believe that if they need me, part of it is emotional, part of it is for the work, for their deadlines. I cannot just come back in 3 weeks and say, I have the best response to what you're asking, because the need was then, not now. So speed is a big part of it. Communication is a big part of it. So I guess those two things are quite relevant for me.
I'm interested that you didn't say about asking questions, actually, because both in journalism and the research, how you frame the questions makes obviously a huge difference, right?
Very true, very true. And that's absolutely right. My thinking of that was that goes under communication. How can you communicate without asking questions? Someone implicitly or explicitly should be asking questions, reframing, setting the
Yeah.
context. It's absolutely, it's an obvious one, an important one, but I do believe that asking questions isn't always enough. Like I went back to this best research example. No, you can ask those questions, but the way you deliver the results and the one that people consume, if that doesn't work out, if it's a boring one, unappealing one, irrelevant one, doesn't create the impact, it still doesn't work. So I take it under the communication umbrella.
I mean, I often think that the getting the question right is the hardest bit. There's a book called Designing Design by Kenya Hara, and I don't know if he still is. He's the creative director of Muji, or he was.
Okay.
And he talks about this, and it's called Designing Design because his whole thing was he has a few different examples of coming up with trying to sort of find the right question for a design brief or a design project or whatever. Is the hard bit. Once you get it really well, so there was a project where they got different architects to redesign pasta forms, and each architect took their sort of classic forms and sort of translated them to the pasta.
All
but
right.
it turned out
Interesting.
well, it turned out that the classic shape of like penne and stuff that had been developed by Italians over the years was still the best one for kind of carrying the sauce. But he had this kind of whole thing in the book. You just keep seeing once you get an interesting question, everything else sort of flows much more easily from it. And I kind of think that's sometimes true of coaching. Of people come in and they're like, I want this, this, and this, or I'm having this problem with that. And there's often that moment of like, but is that really the question here? So I'm interested for you. You have, you focus on UXs, and UX has been through a particularly difficult period. I mean, lots of us have in the last sort of couple of years or so. What have you been seeing coming up in your coaching and the kinds of issues that people have been dealing with? Are there any patterns there?
Yeah, there is. And thank you for that questioning example too. I'll go ahead and say something a little provocative, and hopefully that's going to make a more interesting podcast episode for us. I do believe the value of open, non-biased, non-judgmental questions, indeed important ones to ask ourselves before we coach, because as a coach, yourself is your most important tool. You need to be self-aware, and you need to ask those questions to yourself as well as your clients, your coaches, right? But there's a point to be made also to balance between the questioning part, as well as having more direct statements, because one thing that I hear from my coaches over and over, and the reason why the ones that stick with me go ahead and continue working with me and love the impact that they get, is because it's not this philosophical engagement with open questions one after the other. We need to eventually narrow it down. We need to make final statements, and we need to figure out what it is that we're going to experiment with. So questions, tremendously important, I agree, but it also does not end with questioning. So for me, what success looks like is not that someone leaves like, oh, I got amazing questions, let me think about them. Of course, that's part of it, but we need to also narrow down the scope, see what we can commit to experiment with any given month, and so on, and take action. It's all about taking action. So that's one part of it. And what you're saying about what UXers are going through, that's absolutely right. And that's why, actually, to be so transparent, I took a bet and left my full-time job and wanted to be a UX career coach, because one thing we've all learned, and I'm curious what you think, is that no matter how you get a promotion, you're an overperformer, you're very loyal to your organization, you might be laid off from one day to the next due to reorgs, due to whatever that might be taking place in your department or in your organization at large. So one thing I'm seeing from people is that it's not like a formula that you apply for your success, and as long as you get a green light from your organization, you're good to go. So people are realizing, wow, I'm employed full time. I'm having a great salary. I love my colleagues, but I need to be networking. I need to be building my brand outside of my organization. I need to be more active. I think people are realizing that, people meaning UXers, that their UX career is the most important product that they are working on. So they need to design their UX careers. It's not just something that is hanging in there. That's an important one that we've, I think, all learned.
Yeah, it is. There's a screenwriter called John August. He wrote Big Fish and Charlie's Angels and quite a lot of other stuff. And he talks often. He's got a really good podcast called Script Notes, and he talks often. People write in and they're saying, as a young screenwriter, what can I do and so forth, and how can I break in, get my break in things. And one of the things he said was to network when you're junior. He said, because at some point, like, I have now friends and colleagues who are kind of, heads of CEOs and, or kind of heads of design, senior people, right? But they're all people I've known since, 25, 30 years. And I think it's really important to do that, because your peers, the temptation is always want to network to the senior people, which I think is also important. But I think as you're building up your career, it's really important to sort of stay in touch and network with your peers, because at some point they are going to be someone who might be hiring you or any of that kind of stuff. And I think that is really important. Yeah. The career thing's interesting. I mean, I put a comment on one of your posts the other day that I've had probably about, I sort of consider I've had about 3 different careers. I've had a sort of career as some kind of digital interactive thing guy, it's changed over the years. Well, 30 years ago, UX, interaction design, any of those things, they didn't really have names. Information architecture a little bit, maybe. It was probably the first one to emerge as a clear discipline. But prior to that, it was all like HCD and things like that. And so... Yeah, and then I moved into sort of service design stuff in the early 2000s. But I've always also had a sort of academic life and been teaching more or less, depending on sort of what's going on. And now the coaching. So that's sort of 4 careers, if you like. And I think it's important for people, right, to remember, particularly when they're in their, I don't know what the average age is of your coachees, but particularly in their sort of 20s and 30s, to remember there's quite a lot of life left to go, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, you said it out actually, but one thing that I appreciate from what you said is that you still teach and you have a diverse background as well as current experience. And I think that's important for a coach, because what I also insist on doing is I make sure I write at UX Collective. I make sure that I teach and train and do group events, because I need to be in touch with the realities of the people. And I need to, it's not going to sound very humble, but I am going to say that from a place of humility, but also boldness, that I think to be a good coach, you need to be that, person that asks open question, but in a way also an opinion leader. And you cannot do that if you're only practicing coaching. So for me, all those other things you're mentioning, like teaching, what does it take to teach? You need to continuously learn. You need to be giving workshops, master classes, writing articles. You even wrote a wonderful book. Like, all those things are so important to, I believe, establish yourself as a coach that stays relevant. And I do my best in doing those things as well, because like it's so important, as you just described.
You're talking of that. You've got a session at one of the leadership ateliers. So I'm doing the one in Lisbon for the Hatch conference guys, and you're doing the one in Barcelona. So my one's my one is in Lisbon in a few weeks' time. Actually, not long, in a couple of weeks' time in April. When is your one in Barcelona?
5th and 6th of May. I know it by heart because the 6th is my daughter's birthday.
Yeah, it's just before mine, actually.
Yeah, really cool.
So what will you be doing in that? Can you share anything? It might, depending on the timing of this. I hope that this gets out before then, but
Okay,
it
I
might
was
have
gonna
already
say
happened. What did you do?
exactly. What did you do, or what will you be
Yeah,
doing
exactly.
somehow? So I will be giving a master class for two groups of cohorts, let's say, and it's gonna be an hour and a half to help people do their best in communicating design's value to non-design stakeholders. Because no matter the sector in which you work, the kind of organization
Mm,
where you collaborate, people keep on coming with this. I'm a UXer, I'm a designer, and I find it very hard to communicate the value of my team's work, whether if you're a senior IC or a manager or a director, for those that are not UXers. Like, they don't understand. It
mm,
just feels like an add-on irrelevant thing. Like, why is this guy wasting our time? So it's gonna be an interactive session where we're gonna establish, everything that is worth knowing, very pragmatic, very actionable about communication styles and what it is that business leaders, product leaders care about when we build material to sell, to be profitable and all that, like different languages, different
yeah,
priorities and whatnot. And then we're gonna deep dive into the kind of ways we can still root for UX and like be flexible, but also adjust our communication style to make sure that it works out well with a CEO or a product leader, a business leader, or what have you. So it's going to be a session where there's going to be a lot of engagement across participants. And yeah, hopefully it's going to be both relevant and exciting.
nice, good. I'm sure it'll be fantastic. It's all
I'm so
very, very
excited.
clear.
I got even so excited, to be honest, because I've spoken with you, as you know, and like
Mm,
two of my colleagues that I really, really trust at Miro, and a freelancer that also publishes books, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is super relevant. I never thought about it." That I was like, "That's great." And I just checked out the list of participants, and they're coming from Middle East. They're coming from all across Europe and the US. And so I'm like, whoa, like this is gonna be a historic moment. Not because I believe the value of the material, of course, that's
mm,
beautiful, but I really appreciate that it's gonna be very international because
yeah,
design
yeah,
work is very cultural as well. And also people are gonna bring diverse set of experiences as they engage in pairs. So
yeah.
I'm quite excited. Yeah.
That's good. It's one of the things I really like about my coaching, actually, is that I coaches from all over the world, from all different, from startups to scale ups to kind of large enterprises to agencies and owners of agencies, small agencies and things like that. And I think it's been, it's a sort of cliche to say it's a privilege, but it really has been. I find it a real privilege to experience a much broader set of people's experiences than I have myself. I mean, especially as like middle-aged white guy, right? So I'm as kind of in the middle of that privilege as you can get. But it's
I,
it's
I mean, like, you cannot get more privileged.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm
I don't
sorry.
know. Like,
I'm sorry. But yeah, no, it has been really good. That's also goes for sort of race and gender and sexualities too. There is a real kind of range there, and it's because the sort of coaching's so intimate. I don't know if you find this. I feel like I sort of get in someone's
it's
life, and I
extremely
really,
intimate.
and I
It's
feel,
extremely intimate.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel, I feel kind of, yeah, it's privileged. I feel very lucky to be that those people, and honoured really that those people kind of let me in like that. I don't know if it's the same for
100%.
you.
It cannot be it cannot resonate more with me, honestly, because my take is that, and I say it to everyone, like, I'm not a lives coach, I'm not like a
Mm,
relationship coach. It is very specific to your UX career. It's very specific to the impact you want to create at work. You want to get a promotion, you want to have more influence in your organization, you want to be hired in a better organization with whatever principles. So we are very action oriented. It's not just like philosophical or cheesy materials. Not to disrespect that kind of coaching, maybe it's appealing to others, but I'm very clear, like, hey, I'm a coach, but before a coach, I'm a UXer. I actually, I'm gonna talk about tangible things that will resonate with you,
yeah,
and it's gonna impact. But that being said, one thing I also tell everyone is like, when it boils down to talking about your family dynamics, of course we're going to talk about it, because there's no way for you to concentrate at work and be successful by our definition if you're doing the heavy lifting constantly with your partner. So your work life, emotional life, your private life is under a bigger umbrella of yourself. And without considering that, we cannot think of your career. So everything emotional, everything personal do come in. So there are some sessions that people cry or we laugh a lot, and
Yeah, yeah.
so those are indeed part of what we do. And I feel extremely like gratified, because part of what I did for my undergrad studies was clinical psychology. Obviously, I'm interested in understanding people through the lenses of cultural anthropology. Even evolutionary biology was part of what I did, which I loved, and psychology. But I entertained the idea of being a therapist. But then I realized that I actually love to offer a little bit of empowerment to high functioning, successful people that want to
Yeah.
get even more impactful. That to me delivers a lot more value than maybe treating someone with a very serious mental illness. And that is an absolutely rewarding line of work. I don't disrespect at all. But I feel like in what we do, Andy, we can help people to feel better, create more impact at work, and also be part of their personal lives in a way that is very action driven. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I mean, similar thing for me, right? So I always say I'm kind of opinionated as a coach, because I think, the whole point of coming to someone who's been through the path that you've been through is that's the reason for coming to it, rather than just a sort of general career or life coach that's just going to say, what would having that do for you? And, those open questions are useful sometimes, but I usually switch. I'm usually sort of saying, okay, here's my opinion now, but you take it or leave it. I don't want to sort of set myself up as a guru, but I kind of think what's the point of coming to me if I don't give that?
Like, no disrespect to HR professionals, or I know that there's amazing certification programs for coaching, but I also do feel like, hey, if I have, for instance, right now 17 clients, all the async exercises I provide or the questions I ask them and what we are doing with them, they're all very different from each other. There's not like this HR worksheet sort of template that everybody gets, because this is like companies training or anything like that. And the way that I attain these individuals is because of the experience. So and having my sense of what success looks like together with each person. It's that co-creation.
Yeah, it's funny you said I'm not a relationship coach, because I kind of feel like I am. Like more and more and more. I mean, I was aware of this some time ago, but it just becomes ever more clear to me that almost none of my coaching, none of my job as a design director, like very little of it was actually directing designers. And,
Of course.
in any creative sense, I just all the time, and so much of the coaching is, I'm having this really difficult problem with this stakeholder or with someone else or this colleague. And that's the stuff that really fills people's heads, really kind of, sets them off on a kind of spin, and quite often people will prefer to leave a job than have a difficult or conflict conversation with a colleague.
Absolutely.
It's
With your
amazing.
boss, especially, or
Yeah.
with their coach. But I will add one more thing. I don't disagree with you. Anything around like emotional awareness, relationship management, those are key, because I always tell it to people, hard skills are amazing. You can either learn them, claim to have them. I don't necessarily think your hard skills alone will make a major difference, especially in the era of AI. So the relationship management will. However, I think there is a difference between someone that calls themselves a life coach, that sort of relationship term that applies so broadly and abstractly without any context. So I really appreciate that we can offer, how to build influence, how to gain more power in a way that you can be more impactful in your organizations, how to be more smart about your relationship management at work, but within UX, where we understand UX processes, how product teams work, and what it really takes to empower ICs. If you're a manager, if you're an IC, how to then go ahead and defend the value of your work and that sort of thing. So I think it's the application of that relationship bit within a particular field makes it all very, very relevant, in my opinion.
Yeah, but even the storytelling stuff, the things where I keep coming back to the relationship stuff is because I think that I've learned more from books about relationships, listening to podcasts about that stuff, even things like dating for networking, right, and stuff like that. I've learned more about that from that world, from the world of really understanding interpersonal relationships, than I ever have from reading any kind of management books or how to build high performing teams and all that kind of stuff. Because actually, even something like the storytelling thing, if you've ever had that thing in your personal relationship of like, I've got this need here, there's this thing that bothers me, and every time I talk about it, my partner somehow just doesn't get it, and we seem to be kind of talking at cross purposes, and all of that stuff is exactly the same. Why is this not landing with that person, with that stakeholder? It's exactly the same as, how is it that we can misunderstand each other so much, and yet we know each other so well at the same time, and all of those kind of dynamics about where people go when they get stressed. So my thing, I've just talked about it over and over and over, is this idea that the world of work is just really filled with fear and anxiety. Right? Everyone seems to be operating from a position of fear and anxiety. And
I remember you said that. Yeah.
and it sort of explains so much behavior, and it's kind of much more of like an empathetic view, really, because once you get the fact that this person isn't being difficult and annoying because that's what they want to be, they're doing it out of a place of fear and anxiety. I think it kind of can really help reframe the way you kind of then approach that person. That's why I think the relationship stuff is so important.
I mean, what I do hear you say, and I definitely agree with you, is sometimes we narrow down our focus on the work itself
Yeah, yeah.
that we're talking about. We're talking about retention, acquisition, user flow, these pain points. But it's important when you collaborate to remember that you're collaborating with a human being that was once, as a child, had their challenges with their parents, and if they have a conflict at work with their, at home with their wife or their kids or whatever, all those things are part of the equation. So building a relationship that extends beyond the superficial challenges that are being faced in any given project, that's key. But I also wouldn't create a duality between reading about relationships and personal stuff versus business MBA books, because I learned also a great deal from those books. And I think for UXers especially, gaining the trust of their stakeholders, of their collaborators, they need to be able to showcase that they understand the language of business. They need to showcase their competencies. So to be able to context switch from one to another will be an important one. So I wouldn't zero in on in one way or another. I think we can gather something more holistic.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I guess my view is that the language of business is not really the language of business. That when we say that, what is it that we actually mean? And I think what we mean is the stakeholders we're presenting to care about different things than we care about. And it's not really about kind of business, because business is this like hand wavy term, right? It doesn't mean anything. But it's what we're really saying is that you're having that kind of stranger in a strange land moment where you're going somewhere and you're presenting to people, you're talking to people who daily speak a different language to you. I would argue that a lot of the language of business is masking, right? It lacks honesty, a lot of particularly jargon and the kinds of things. You ever listen to like a quarterly earnings call and the CEO just kind of spout like nonsense, and it's we're having it's been a challenging quarter because of kind of market headwinds. It's like what are you saying? We didn't earn as much money as we expected to. But there's a real lack of emotional honesty in the language of business, and I think one of the clashes between design culture in general and sort of business culture is the kind of, I think design generally is closer to being closer to sort of to that kind of emotional language, and more so maybe emotionally honest around in their interactions, and interested in that area and interested in that language. And when we're doing research into people, we're wanting to understand people's lives and things. And yet there's this kind of distancing, which I blame the fear and anxiety thing, and this idea of being professional, where you kind of move away from that into this kind of language of business. But underneath that armor is all the kind of human stuff. And, CEOs and senior stakeholders, they make decisions not on hard facts and numbers. Well, many of those things are hand wavy anyway. Like a spreadsheet is way more vague. Like a forecast of a bunch is way more vague than a prototype that you put in front of people, right? It's much more hand wavy.
data
Yeah.
set, you can take a bunch of different decisions and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
them. But I think it's a healthy divergence, let's say,
Yeah.
with you and mine, even if we have a lot of points in common, is that if UXers, and this is my view, and if anyone watches this podcast and wants to challenge that or give examples or otherwise, I think it'll be interesting to hear. To be able to gain influence,
Yes.
I don't think that providing opposing approaches towards our non-UX, non-design stakeholders will help. We need to first mirror them,
Yeah.
use the same language to be able to communicate directly and indirectly that I hear you, I understand you, I'm like you, I'm one of you. If you want to even pull them into that space beyond the armors where we can talk in a more human way, because I think it's one thing where we reject that language, is another thing where we say, look, we understand that language, we identify why there's a need for it, and we are articulate, we can speak that language, but at the same time there's more than that, and we can also
Yeah.
help you see that. I think so. It's going to be important to, instead of like creating oppositions, I'm not saying that's what you
No, I
say,
agree. I agree.
I'm saying
Yeah.
that it's going to be an important that like UXers also begin to see themselves as business people in two ways. First, serving within their organizations, but also the business of running their own business,
Yeah. Yeah.
their
No, I
career.
absolutely agree. I mean, I think certainly the shift kind of to leadership in the kind of conversation, designers tend to talk design to other designers, and one of the shifts as you move into a sort of management and leadership role is you actually have to talk about design less. In the same way that accountants, well, I guess they talk about accountancy, but they will kind of talk about what matters to the business. And that sort of shift of how does the design serve the business rather than how can the business recognize design as being this kind of fantastic thing is really important. So
Yeah.
we're coming up to time. We could talk for ages. I have one
We
final
normally do.
question for all my guests. The podcast is named after the film Powers of 10 by Ray and Charles Eames. And it's all about the relative size of things in the universe. And it's go and watch it. It's really great. So my question is, what one small thing is either overlooked or could be redesigned that would have an outsized impact on the world?
The big one, and I'm glad I got to think about it just a little bit. I think it's time that we redefine what we understand from success. That's a small thing because
Mm,
we're not going to change how the business world works, how products are being made, but it's how you reframe success to make it work in your own terms. Today, for many people, it tends to be about your title, it tends to be about where you work, the name of the organization, your income, but these don't necessarily correspond with your degree of fulfillment. You might
mm,
have the most sexy title, earn a great deal, work for a really fancy organization, but you might be depressed. I actually have clients working at Meta, Google, all those places, pretty senior roles, wonderful salaries, and yet they have autoimmune diseases, and they are being triggered more and more due to whatever it is that they feel, and there's that lack of fulfillment. I'm not going to go ahead and in the remaining minutes blame any organization. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
like that, but it's about really be honest with yourself and asking, okay, well, what is success? You live only once, you deserve to be fulfilled, but the only way to make that happen is if you can be honest about what success looks like, rather than just adopting external formulas.
yeah. It's funny. The that's a very good answer. The question that an issue that coaches come in a lot is around confidence. I think that's probably for you too, right? And
Yeah.
I always feel that confidence comes from, the closer you are to being true to yourself, the more you have confidence because you have nothing to be sort of found out about, nothing to be, you're not hiding
I
anything,
agree.
and it's actually about being comfortable with yourself more than any kind of thing that you somehow exude, or put on.
I couldn't agree more. And it just sounds like, from the way that you described it, the opposite of confidence is actually like defensiveness, maybe. Like you need to be there just like defending yourself, or feel bad about yourself. And, those like imposter syndrome
Yeah,
is
or
part.
pretending to be someone else, right? Or pretending to be
Yeah.
something you're not. Yeah, yeah. Mel, where can people find you online?
That's a very fun question. I don't know when you're going to publish this, but Career with Mel is a website that we are building right now. It's not ready yet, but it's going to be ready very soon. But until then, where I'm most active is LinkedIn. So they can search me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you're going to drop the link.
Yeah, I will. Okay. And your Substack, would that be going away or?
No, it's gonna stay. I love to use that space, but of course, let's see what future brings. If people find me on LinkedIn, I have it on my profile, my Substack
Yeah.
newsletter link, and I'll make sure to add that to my website as well. It's gonna be
Okay.
a simple, easy one with some videos and hopefully fun views from Barcelona.
Yeah. And people will find your writing and talks all over the place actually. So if you Google Mel, then you'll find them there.
Whoa, it sounds like you Googled me.
I also got some special links from you. No, I have Googled you, of course. Of course, I
Okay,
stalk
I
all of my
Googled you
guests.
too. I,
It's research. It's research, journalistic research.
yes, of course, I Google people all the time, and I've even like used ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT. I tried it on myself the other day, and it got
Yeah.
it wrong. So
Oh,
there's a
really?
surprise. Yeah, it got the title of my book wrong. So
Oh,
and then it
sorry for
told me
that.
that I'd written something else, so which I hadn't written.
Oh no,
So,
you had
yeah.
a fight.
I do. It's just not very good. I'm an AI, a bit of an AI skeptic. So there we go. Mel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being my guest on Power of
Thank you
10.
for having me. Thank you for having me and having this conversation.
Thank you. You've been watching and listening to Power of 10. You can find more about the show on Polaine.com, where you can also check out my leadership coaching practice, online courses, as well as sign up for my very irregular newsletter, Doctor's Note. If you have any thoughts, put them in the comments below or get in touch. You'll find me at Polaine on pkm.social on Mastodon. I'm on LinkedIn or on my website. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.